Welcome to the Monday, April 17th, Education and Supplementary Meeting of the Board of School Directors. I'll turn the meeting over to Mr. Copeland.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Dr. Van Lynch. At this evening's meeting, we have three presentations for the board, two on some programs and one on a schedule change. Dr. Everslag will have another rendition of his middle school presentation for this evening as we had advertised. So we turn it over to you.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Mr. Copeland. As you said, we have three presentations. The first two are relatively brief updates that we shared at the Curriculum Committee of the Board on April 5th. Mr. Cody, Director of K-12 Curriculum Instruction and Professional Learning, is going to provide us with an update on the K-2 adoption of the Investigations Math series and an update from Act 86 from PDE on an graduation requirement. So, Mr. Cody.
Thank you, Dr. Everslag. Good evening, Board.
Good evening.
So to start off this evening, just to provide a brief update to the board from our CCOB around the proposed purchase for the math investigations for grades kindergarten through 2 for their math program. This particular pilot started this particular year, and when we were looking at a particular resource for the math investigations, the grade level teams at the elementary level, as well as Nancy Akantiamesa, who is the elementary STEM supervisor, set a list of criteria to help identify an appropriate resource for the elementary math program. And that criteria involved having an alignment to the PA core standards that were developed back in 2010 for mathematics, and then later went over to the PA Common Core. So for the past few years, we've been operating with resources that were aligned to Pennsylvania standards, but as the standards changed, we were further removed with the older resource, and we continued to look at a particular curriculum cycle revision from the elementary standpoint, and through that process we began to give careful attention to the math contents that were within that particular curriculum so that we could better align to those state standards. Additionally, we were looking for a resource that develops student thinking and understanding around mathematical concepts, and also help teachers and students make sense of that new math and those new standards to ease that transition. With that, we ensured that the materials that we were providing students allowed for a thoughtful practice of applications of mathematical procedures. So the Investigations 3 pilot started with 6 grade levels at grade 1 or kindergarten, and each grade level in a building had a particular stake within the pilot. So for example, at Kinwood, that would have been kindergarten. At Belmont Hills could have been grade 1. So the grade levels were staggered in terms of the pilot as well. So the investigations met the needs because we did see a reorganization and a need for rewritten content that supported the PA core standards from a mathematical practice, and we continue to emphasize student thinking and understanding around making sense of that particular math. And there were also a new technology platform that expanded the delivery of the resources for students from an online aspect through the games as well as digital tools and planning for teachers. So the elementary math pilot, we wanted to provide a clear rationale for the change. As I mentioned earlier, there was a curriculum revision cycle that we as a curriculum team began to partake in this year. So one of the rationales was that this was an outdated resource with a copyright of 2017, and there was a need to update that particular resource that more closely aligns with the PA Common Core and the instructional practices of mathematics for teachers and students. We reorganized and rewritten content to support the PA Core a few years back, and again, wanted to ensure that the materials and resources that we are using are more closely aligned to that, to those teaching practices and learning practices, as well as expanding the delivery of digital resources for our teachers, our students, and our families. There was a process to this particular pilot. There was an overview of the investigations 3 by our principals and supervisors and math specialists within each of the buildings last spring, and continued to work together as an elementary team over the course of the summer to develop in those grade levels that we're going to pilot, so that going into the year they would have a clear idea and a clear path of instruction for students. We piloted groups, the chosen groups, grade 1 at each building. Gladwin was grade 1 and Penwyn was grade 2. The professional learning provided to pilot groups prior to and during the pilot, so teachers throughout this process had continued professional development throughout this particular pilot. And during each phase, there was feedback solicited from the teachers and recommendations taken prior to this particular adoption before bringing it to the board during CCOB. Additionally, there were classroom observations that were taken by Nancy Akantia-Mesa, as well as our building principals, and attendance at the grade level meetings by the math supervisor to make sure that all of that feedback was pulled together in order to move forward with a strong recommendation for the kindergarten through grade 2 pilot. As you would recall, we did pilot this from a K to 5 perspective for this year, and grades 3 through 5 wish to continue that pilot to really gain a great sense of knowledge and scope of that full curriculum before making a recommendation to the board later in June. At this point, I'll take any questions that you may have around the K to 2 investigations mathematics.
Thank you, Mr. Cody, for the presentation. Are there questions from board members? Please, Dr. O'Leary.
Oh, excuse me. The digital content, can you talk a little bit, is that going to be more time on the computer or presenting information digitally? And then I just would like a little bit more description of the additional digital content. And then my other question, which I did ask at the meeting, I'm not sure if you're prepared to answer it, but Nancy was, if you could talk a little bit about the differentiated instruction and how it's supported by these materials?
Sure. So we're not putting students in front of a computer more for that instructional purpose. These are resources where students will have the opportunity, so to sort of tie the two questions together, to support the students through their skill and practice. So at the elementary level, teachers design specific workstations to meet the needs of students on varying levels. And throughout those workstations, there may be a technology component in that workstation where a student is engaging in a digital resource or a digital component of an online game or a group game. So the level of instruction is still occurring from the teacher, and not generated from a computer where students are sitting down looking at a large screen listening to a video tutorial. Those digital resources are more accessible for student practice within the classroom and at home. Along with that, there are student reference books that are hardbound copies that students will have access to within the classroom, as well as being able to take those resources and having them available at home if a computer is not readily available for them with internet access at home.
Dr. Gilbert?
Just following up on that, thanks for the presentation, and we talked about this at length at the curriculum committee meeting, previous one, was that we talked about the issue of the increasing sort of digital resources for students and families and what benefits that brought, but that we're also, as there have been in the past, concerns about differing access to the internet at home. And so the committee had asked that the administration kind of come back to us with an assessment of what were the needs. We know that at the elementary level, in particular, the principals know which students do not have access to the internet and sort of how to help families negotiate that. But over, certainly over the last 8 years, we've periodically discussed that, and we haven't for a little while. So we'd like that to come back to the board for further discussion. So
Sure. Thank you.
I did have one question, Mr. Cody, and my apologies, I was not at the curriculum meeting. Prior to piloting the Investigations 3 text, were there other conversations about texts that might also be appropriate in terms of alignment with PA core standards and what our students' learning needs might be?
I believe that there were other resources, and being for a very smooth transition, teachers opted to stick with the Investigations pilot because it was a resource that they were currently using and familiar with. And being familiar with some of the games and some of the processes of teaching and learning that type of math, they decided that they were going to continue with that Investigations and become more aligned with more accessible resources for students and teachers.
Thank you. And did teachers mention any challenges that they found with using Investigations? Were there things that they wished were available that are not, that we may need to consider supplementing?
I haven't heard of any. Dr. Van Lynch, I'd be happy to circle back with Nancy and find out any answers to that question.
But, I mean, it sounds, I mean, looking at the presentation, obviously the due diligence was done. I was just curious if there were some kind of wish-fors that may have come up in terms of the curriculum itself.
I'll circle back.
Oh, Dr. Eversole,
She
thank you.
mentioned something.
There were some minor changes, challenges just with the implementation of a new series, and some requests for some additional professional learning and teachers being more acclimated to the resources to support families. So there were some suggestions from the teachers for how to support that, but they were minor as far as the implementation.
Thank you. Any additional questions? Okay, thank you, Mr. Cody.
Thank you.
And our next presentation, you're back again.
So this is just a brief update regarding Act 86. Act 86 is an amendment to the Section 1605 of Public School Code of 1949, which is allowing students to substitute a math and/or science graduation credit with a computer science or information technology course. And this decision is is agreed upon by the district. So Act 86 states that a student who successfully completes a course in computer science or information technology during grades 9 through 12 shall be permitted to apply up to 1 credit earned for successful completion of such course to satisfy the student's mathematics or science requirement for graduation, provided that the governing body of the student's public high school shall have discretion to determine the graduation requirement which the credit earned by the student shall be applied. So what this means that the district is not changing the Lower Merion School District graduation requirement for the number of mathematic or science credits. However, this will provide flexibility for students to apply that computer science or information technology course as a credit option for a student's math or science course at the discretion of the district.
Thank you, Mr. Cody. Are there questions? And again, I know this was discussed at length at curriculum. Okay, all right, thank you. Mr. Copeland?
We've had a lot of, thank you, Ryan. We've had a lot of robust discussions over the last guess, month or so about the middle school schedule. And as we had promised throughout the process, there were several points in which we wanted to stop and have discussions with parents and teachers and in some cases students. And each time we do that, Dr. Eversley has tried to weave back into his presentation to the board, CCOB. It's the new position you have over there that's caused the problem, I guess. And so each time we try and come back and answer some of those questions. This is our culminating meeting. So with that.
Thank you, Mr. Copeland. Good evening, everyone, again. Pleased to be back with you to talk to you a little bit more about our middle school schedule alignment process. This process has involved extensive communication along the way, and we anticipate additional communication moving forward. We are at the point where we're looking for we're at the point where we need to adopt a schedule at the scheduling standpoint for programming for next year, and we had talked about this being a target date as far as a culmination of multiple presentations. So this is actually the fifth of 5 public presentations to the board that we have had on the schedule, and each of those have changed in a little bit based on the feedback that we've gotten from the community and the questions that have arisen, the challenges that have been brought forward, and we've tried to address those uniquely in each of these presentations. So this is presentation number 5 on this matter. And in addition to that, we've had these one-page building summaries that have been created and distributed in the buildings, and those are also posted online and in the offices of the main offices of the middle school. We've had 2 parent information Q&A sessions, one at each of the middle schools, on March 15th at Walsh Valley and March 16th at Bala-Cynwyd with the administrations of both schools to talk about questions from families or students about the proposed schedule. So this is the education meeting of the board, our April 17th meeting. We have a couple other internal communication requirements necessary, one which is already passed March 27th. And I say that even though it's in the past, but we needed to gather back information from students and families specifically about their requests in the schedule to confirm whether our ability to meet those requests. And so that's why that was the March date. And we're planning to move forward with communicating, of course, to our 6th and 7th grade students who are currently in our middle schools and will be returning next year to a new schedule. So just to talk a little bit about the why behind this, we obviously want to value program equity and curriculum alignment across our middle schools. Our strategic plan drives all of our planning and our thinking, and one of the charges of this strategic plan was to increase middle school electives, and that's one of the products of this proposal. To share resources has been, we've seen this process at the high school level, and I think we should embrace how sharing resources at the high school level by having an aligned schedule has been good for kids, not only through curriculum discussions and programming equity across the buildings, but also sustainability of programs. There's a lot of examples. The one that I've shared in the past has been the Japanese program, for example. We have Japanese that's offered at both schools. It's a relatively small program at both schools. There is interest at both schools, but there is not enough interest to have full programming or full staffing at both schools. Therefore, we have a Japanese program at both schools with a shared teacher that goes between the 2 buildings, meets the needs of kids at both schools. We're able to continue and sustain that program. That's one small example of how programs can be sustained through alignment, and we anticipate this schedule as being one of the positive byproducts of the alignment. And also to maintain the unique aspects of each school. This too, I think we have a great example in the high schools. We have aligned schedules and aligned programming in our high schools, but we certainly have been able to maintain the unique aspects of each school. There's a wonderful culture in each school, but it's a unique culture, and that can be maintained even as we go through and align programming and schedules. So through this process, we gathered a lot of information from staff members, from parents, and from students, and there were certain values that emerged through that process that drove our decision-making that were really non-negotiable values in our proposed schedule. Those would be to maintain teaming, which is basically the core of what the middle school experience is. Include daily and intervention time for students, which also involves student choice, but the flexibility with student groupings to be able to intervene and allow students to enrich their experience daily. We wanted to maintain that core classes met daily. There had been, explored the idea of core classes rotating on a unique schedule similar to what the high school had experienced. That was not a value that emerged at the middle school. There was strong feelings to keep classes between around 40 to 50 minutes to maintain around the same course length, class length, excuse me. And there was a strong value to increase student choice in the schedule. And teacher collaboration time has been built into our schedule. Maintaining that was very important for not only programming, but for support for our teachers and for students, as students benefit from that teacher daily collaboration time. And we wanted to maintain time devoted each day to our personal development courses, or what are called specials courses. Through that, because most of the schedule changes that are being proposed surround the issue of specials, there were some values that emerged specifically pertaining to the ideas of specials in the middle school. The core class experience for kids in 6th through 8 is going to be almost identical to what it is now. So the changes, bless you, the changes are going to be around the areas of specials. And values that drove our decision making was ensuring that every student had time in specials every day, the same amount of time that they have. Currently, kids have 2 periods of specials every day. We vowed to make sure that that would continue, with students both having 2 specials a day, and also ensure that there was a balancing of that, where students in every morning and every afternoon, regardless of grade, regardless of school, would have a special. So that as a great advantage to the schedule. And to keep every program. We weren't looking to cut any programs, but while we wanted to keep the programs, we really wanted to commit to a more balanced and equitable distribution over the middle school years and experiences for students. And what you'll see as you'll look at the different schools is, while the programs are both great programs, there are really stark differences between how the specials classes are delivered, their frequency by grade, and there is an imbalance. And we thought it was important that we would balance that experience for students. And as I said earlier, increase the opportunity for students to have some input on the specials that they pursue. So as we went from a schedule that's been in place to a new schedule, there are certain things that have stayed the same. There are still 5 core classes daily. There are still 2 specials classes every day. That's 360 specials classes for each student every year. There's still common planning time for teachers every day, and that allows for team meetings, parent meetings, and department meetings. And we maintain the middle school teaming structure. Again, those are values that were from the core of our decision making. There are some differences to the proposed schedule, and the differences are there a more balanced minimum number of class meetings per special in the 6th and 7th grade. There's more student-directed choice, allows for time in specials at all 3 grades, but that choice increases as students move through middle school. There's a little bit of choice in 6th grade, a little bit more in 7th grade, and even more in 8th grade. We are proposing that homeroom is incorporated into the school day to start period 1, as opposed to having a separate homeroom like Welsh Valley does currently. And this would allow for 46 minutes of periods, 46-minute lengths of periods for all classes, and would allow for a learn period to be incorporated into the schedule every day for intervention and enrichment. So throughout the presentation, I'll visually represent this in a few different ways, and hopefully give you a picture of where we're coming from and where we're moving to. Currently, you can see on the left of the screen what Welsh Valley's current schedule is and what Ballackinwood's current schedule is, and there's similarities between the two. The first, there's difference in homeroom, However, the next three items, 5 core classes, 2 personal development, lunches are the same. And then there are some differences between Learn is currently offered daily at Welsh Valley. It's not every day. It's twice a week at Ballackinwood. Start time is a 5-minute difference, and the period lengths are slightly different, 44 minutes at Welsh Valley, 45 or 50 minutes based on the rotation at Ballackinwood. The reason for that difference is that, and why the periods are slightly shorter at Welsh Valley, is that there's a homeroom incorporated in the schedule. So the proposal is that there would not be a homeroom where we gain some of those minutes back throughout the day for instructional time, but there would be, as proposed on the right, 5 core classes, 2 personal development, lunch, daily Learn, a daily start time of 8:15 and 46-minute periods. Without a homeroom, students have learned to adapt to that with no problem at Ballackinwood, so we anticipate that not being an issue. Morning announcements are completed during period 1 in the schedule. So I'm going to take you through a little bit of what the schedule would look like in each grade. And in the next few slides, you'll see in the bottom left a grid, Ballackinwood and Welsh Valley, and that is the current distribution of the specials periods per grade. So this is 6th grade, and you can see the distribution and differences between the two schools, how frequently they meet. For example, 6th grade students at Ballackinwood do not have art. 6th grade students at Welsh Valley have art 2 times out of 6 for 1 semester, and you can see the differences in each of the discipline areas. Currently, in the top left, you'll see that there are four personal development classes, phys ed, music, FLES, and health, that are offered 2 times in a 6-day cycle for a full year. Health is still a difference because there's not health offered at 6th grade at Ballackinwood currently. The proposal on the right, you'll see when we move to the proposal is that we move to a 4-day cycle or a 4-day schedule. What that means is we still go to school 5 days a week, but still a 4-day cycle means that we have an A day, a B day, a C day, and a D day, and those days would rotate amongst the four days. So the full year personal development class in the top right would meet once out of every 4 days: phys ed, music, FLES, and health. Now we are introducing at Ballackinwood currently, students have the opportunity to double up in music. They do not have that opportunity at Welsh Valley. We are opening that opportunity to both the schools students at both schools. Therefore, if a student, every student has music 1 out of 4-day cycle in 6th grade. If they choose to double up, we will honor that request, and they can have music 2 out of 4 days in 6th grade at the expense of one of the other personal development classes in the top right. And in the bottom right, you'll see personal development classes that are offered 2 times out of 4 days in the cycle for 1 semester. The advantage of that is you'd have art 2 days in a row and computers 2 days in a row for the first semester, and the next semester that would flip-flop. You'd have family and consumer sciences 2 days and tech ed 2 days. The 7th grade schedule is very similar to the 6th grade schedule with one major change. And if you look in the top left, there's no longer foreign language in the elementary schools. Because the 7th grade experience, students choose a world language, and that class begins being offered every day. So that becomes a major class. So the result of that is that there is an additional available block in the top right corner. You can see the proposed. Instead of being a foreign language in the elementary school there is an additional vacant block, and that students have the choice whether they would like to have an additional music or an additional phys ed class in that vacant block in the top right. The other classes meet at the same level of regularity. There's another visual that I'll show you in a few slides that I think represents this a little more clearly, but this is looking at each grade. Again, 8th grade, the same regularity for the top right classes in the proposal for as far as how regular they are. There is still the additional music or phys ed choice for students. However, we are introducing full year electives in the bottom, that's shown in the bottom right. The full year electives will ask students that are going into 8th grade to rank order those 4 classes: art, computers, family and consumer science, or tech ed. Students would be given 2 of those 4 options for the year. This is a full year elective class, which meets 2 days out of a 4-day cycle for the entire year. This is a more intense experience than students currently have, and the idea is that they are honing in on an area that they have an interest in and are able to explore that more deeply. One of the things that I mentioned earlier that we assess from students what their interest would be to see how, whether or not students would be able to get their top choice. When students at Bala-Cynwyd Middle School, every single student that was asked was able to get their #1 choice for a full year elective. Not every kid was able to get their first and second choice, but the worst case scenario would be first and third choice. So no kid got their fourth choice, every kid got their first choice. It's almost identical at Welsh Valley, but there are a few kids that were not able to get their first choice, a very small number, fewer than 5 kids. Those students were guaranteed to get their second and third choices. We obviously will be working on an individual basis as best we can to make sure that kids' needs are met. And if there are, there's a human element to this process of scheduling that would allow for us to meet with families and try to get input from families. And if need be, we certainly can, which we do now, we'll adjust schedules to try to make best fit for students. So I'm going to pivot to some of the frequently asked questions that have arisen recently and try to respond to those specifically. And the 2 areas that have raised the most number of questions have been around specials and whether or not a particular special area is being reduced, and the idea of challenge support. So the next few slides, and at first I'm going to address that first question of whether the proposed schedule reduces the time that would a student have in a particular special area. So we have, understandably, advocates in our community and both within our system and within our student body and within our community of certain special areas that they have a particular interest. And there was some question of whether those areas are being reduced. So I'm going to give you some of the numbers that are connected to that. But what I think most importantly is that the time that students have for special areas has not been reduced in any way. The time every day is we're committed to 2 periods of special time for every student. And we are not shifting any instructional time away from core classes, from specials to core content. That has not been one of the byproducts of this schedule proposal. However, there are in some disciplines, and based on the middle school, you saw some of the differences between the middle school, there is a reduction in minimum required time for some students. So in some disciplines, based on the middle school they're coming from, there are some differences and reductions in the minimum amount of time. However, we're also confident that the introduction of choice can offset that with students having the ability to really engage in the courses that they are most interested in. So while the minimum is slightly reduced in some areas, we did ensure that there's a balanced exposure to the specials, and I'm going to show you what that looks like. So first, in transitioning from 5th and 6th grade, there were some questions about whether or not the 5th grade, the students would be actually reducing time if going from a 5th grade specials to 6th grade specials, and phys ed was one of those that was cited. Phys ed in 5th grade is a 60-minute phys ed block. The elementary schools work on a 5-day schedule. So for example, the physical education meets 60 minutes for 36 times throughout the year. They're moving to a schedule that has 46-minute phys ed classes 45 times a year. So yes, the class minutes are being reduced from 60 to 46. However, the number of class meetings is increased from 36 to 45. And if you were to total up the number of minutes, you'd see that there are actually 90 more minutes in 5th grade phys ed than there is in 6th grade phys ed. So across the 180 days, there's 90 more minutes. We would argue a couple of things. One, that if you look down the right-hand column of the 6th grade, the totality of the 6th grade specials experience, you're looking at a significant increase in the number of minutes that students have in specials, almost a 7,000-minute increase. They have far more meeting classes of special areas, and you can see what's consistent across that right-hand column is 45 times a year, 45 class meetings of each of those experiences. So while phys ed time, if you count minutes, yes, you'll have 90 fewer minutes. I'd argue that students are going to be, they're going to be moving more in middle school. They're moving from class to class. They're moving around the building. They're changing classes more regularly. But they're also having more physical education classes at 45 times a year, in addition to the introduction of health, which hopefully will be educating them on their habits of wellness that will balance that out as well. But one of the values that we said that we highlighted here through this is a balanced exposure, and that's something that is certainly accomplished through the proposal. And just to clarify those 6th grade classes, that there's a group of them that meet year-long, 1 day out of 4. There's a group of them that meets 2 days out of 4 for a semester, but they both result in 45 class meetings a year. And then if you look at the 6th grade specials experience, this also is answering the question about whether or not there is a reduction. And this is where it really is based on the school, where you're coming from. And very different questions from Bala Cynwyd students and parents than Welsh Valley students and parents, understandably, because their perspective is different based on the experiences of their children. So you can see, again, the proposed number of meetings, an equal balance of 8 experiences at 45 meetings, and the differences for Bala Cynwyd and Welsh Valley currently. So I'll, again, point out that phys ed and music, for example, you see a reduction from 60 class meetings to 45 class meetings. Remember that we will honor requests for 6th graders. If they want to double up in music, that 45 becomes 90. So students that have an interest in music have the opportunity to pursue that with much greater depth. And then when we transition to the 7th grade experience, you see those same experiences in 7th grade offered down the right-hand side of the screen, with one exception. FLES is no longer a special experience in 7th grade. That's because it becomes a full regular class, and that becomes an empty vacant gap and that in the student schedule, and that's open. So that with that opening, it allows for students some opportunities to offer some scheduling flexibility. We offer a student choice for additional phys ed, additional music class, or that opening, which is something that we're really excited about because this is new, it's not in our current schedule, is if a student has challenge or has an instructional support lab or any level of academic support, they can schedule that class in that opening without it being at the expense of another class. And we always, when we make decisions about student programming and do that with families, want to make it work for students. The harsh reality is that it comes at the expense of something else. And that's a difficult decision for students to make. It's a difficult decision for families to make. We hope that the schedule proposal will make that decision a little bit easier because it offers a little bit greater flexibility. And then when we transition to 8th grade, all of those same choices and options are still there. Once again, you have that opening. You still have that flexibility. You can fill it the same way with phys ed or music. However, you have the additional choice of having those bottom 4 classes. Students choose 2 of those 4 and again have a deeper, more extensive experience with those 2 classes. That's a year-long, 2 days out of 4 throughout the year. So the other question that's asked, has been asked most frequently, has been whether or not the schedule reduces the time that a student has in challenge. And I just want to say this as clearly as possible, that that there's no reduction in the level of support that a student could provide, regardless of what supports are in a student's program. If that's a instructional support or it's gifted support, none of that level of support is driven by the schedule. The Bell schedule cannot be a limiting factor in determining the level of service that a student provides, that is provided for a student. We think, as I said earlier, that the proposed schedule provides for greater flexibility, that there are opportunities in 7th and 8th grade for students to schedule those challenge classes without it being at the expense of another class. And I'm going to give you a couple examples of what that looks like in 6th, 7th, and 8th for challenge. So this would be what a sample Bell schedule would look like for a 6th grade student. it's kind of visualizes more on the bell schedule perspective what it would look like. There's a block of specials you see in the morning there at period 3. There's a block of schedules in the afternoon at period 8. And if a student were to be scheduled for a challenge class, the challenge, the GIEP team would meet. They'd have a conversation with the family. They'd talk about the level of need that's most appropriate, and they would collaboratively decide how that challenge need would be best met in the schedule. If the team decided that that was one class out of every 4 days that could be offered, for example, period 8 in place of one of those experiences. If it was 2 classes out of 4, it could be offered in 2 of those, or it could be a combination of the 2 in periods 3 or 8. There's some flexibility for each. Similarly, in 7th grade, the advantage would be the same thing. We'd have the distribution is similar. You can see in period 8 there's that additional music or phys ed choice / challenge at the bottom. That would be our first proposed area if a student would be eligible for services and challenge. But again, that's a collaborative team decision that decides on the extent of the service and where it would be best fit into a student's program. It's a sample 8th grade schedule. It looks very similar to the 7th grade with the exception of the year-long experiences and the choice that's shown in period 3 block. And we have a couple examples. For example, this is 7th grade schedule, same thing with challenge. The challenge in this case would replace right in that period 8 block. It would fit right in there with not at the expense of any class. If the team, of course, decided that it was most appropriate for a student to have challenge 1 day out of every 4-day cycle. Again, a team decision. Students could have a double music in that block. So a 7th grade student, for example, this would be the same for a 6th or an 8th grade. If they chose to have double music, they could have chorus and band scheduled into their schedule. Or if there was, and there's no end to the number of scenarios and combinations here, but this is a unique one. If we had a double music and challenge, that we certainly can be accommodated, bless you, with a band and chorus and challenge also built into the student's schedule. Again, team and family decision that's made in conjunction with the GIEP team. So we feel that the proposed schedule offers our students the best opportunity to realize a step forward towards our strategic plan, to empower students to make better, to feel more vested in their programming, and we feel that it offers a not only balanced programming across the district, but an equitable distribution of experiences for students across grades. So we're excited about the proposal, and at this point, would certainly take any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Dr. Everslock, for the presentation. I want to open it up to questions to the board. Ms. Ackman?
Thanks for the presentation and all the additions you've made in communicating the changes and all the outreach. I have a question, though, and maybe I just don't quite understand how it works. But for challenge, if you want to have, enter this new schedule, if you want to have as much challenge as you currently have, you basically have to ask for more challenge. And that's a group decision, so it might not be granted to you. And then I guess, how will you plan for those challenge classes if that's all an ad hoc discussion per individual student? And maybe I just don't understand how that works. I just know based on one of my kids' experiences that the thing she enjoys about challenge in middle school now is like the dialogue and the debate that you have in certain classes. But if only certain kids want more challenge, I'm just confused about how that's going to work.
Well, Let me say a couple of things. One is we were invited to join a PAGE meeting to talk about this, and of course we accepted that and are willing to go and try to talk through this with families. So it's not necessarily more challenge that you have to ask for. For example, the team would decide whether or not 1 class out of 4, 2 out of 4 would be most appropriate. That doesn't guarantee the same grouping of students every time you meet. And that's similar to how supports are offered with instructional support lab, for example. Like there could be some students may have 3 days out of 4 they meet, others 2 out of 4. So the groupings are not the same, but the opportunity to individualize is really what a GIEP should do. Are still going to be present.
But what would that look like? Is it an independent study? If there's not going to be a group setting, would that be?
There still will be a group setting. It just may not be if you and I are both in challenge and I have your team decided it was most appropriate for you to have challenge 2 out of 4 days and my team said 1 out of 4 days, we just wouldn't, that second day I wouldn't be in your group. You might be with a different group of students, but you'd still have a challenge experience that would be individualized to meet your needs.
Okay.
And so certainly the challenge teachers are looking at always looking at ways to individualize a student's program for extensions, for independent studies and so forth, but it's not going to be all these individuals necessarily in independent studies. There's still an opportunity to be with gifted peers and work through projects collaboratively.
Okay.
I actually think if it's differentiated discussion, the discussion groups, the Socratic seminars, those are a great part of the challenge experience. If I have 2 of those experiences with different groups of students, I would say that's it could potentially more enriching experience.
No,
than the
I
same group.
completely agree. I guess I was confused because I'm assuming enough kids have to request additional challenge to have, but it sounds like I'm confused. So.
Well, you're thinking about it from the student lens, and that's understandable. If you think about it from the teacher lens, and you look at the schedule, for example, every set 3, every period 8, or every period 3, every period 8, each of those classes are offered by all the time. So
Okay.
where the students are moved, but we're offering the classes every time there's a specials block for a grade. So there's going to be a challenge. There's going to be multiple challenge classes throughout a student schedule that they could pursue.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
Could I just follow up on Laurie's question really quickly? Logistically, the GIEP meetings are sprinkled throughout the year for different people. They won't necessarily have one between now and when September starts. Can you talk a little bit about how that would work?
Sure. Assuming we're moving forward with adoption of the schedule, Ms. Frazier and her team of supervisors will be working with both the IEP teachers and the GIEP teachers to make sure that appropriate communication with families and adjustments to any IEPs or GIEPs are made. So in some cases, you're right, the meeting perhaps has already occurred, the annual meeting has already occurred. There are opportunities for revisions to that IEP that aren't too onerous for families, but it will require some communication, and our teachers are braced and ready for that.
Mr. Bonaventura and then Mr. Fetterman.
Thanks, Scott. I think every time you do the presentation, you add a little more and you make it a little clearer. I think this one's been great. This is. I think all your lessons learned. I think you incorporated into this.
So it's the finale.
Yeah. I just had one question. I guess more about the thinking behind it rather than the actual decision. In 6th and 7th grades, some of the personal development classes are once a week for a year, and some are twice a week for a semester. And how did you decide which ones fell into which category and why the semester ones aren't a full year? And can you talk about that a little?
Yeah, sure. So we talked, the collaborative group that was meeting regularly to discuss this were the full administrative teams from both middle schools and me. So we were occasionally gathering information from the surveys, from different people, other people joined us. But when that group was talking, one of the things that we focused on was, yes, we have a balance of experiences. Which of those experiences are really sacrificed if they're not year-long? for example, music. You want music to be part of a year-long experience where you wouldn't want that to be a semester course. You could make an argument that any class is better if you have it throughout the whole year, and I hear that, but we thought having phys ed regularly throughout the year, having music throughout the year, would be more suited to the year-long experience.
I'm just wondering why the semester ones were chosen for semester and not year-round.
They could be. So in other words, with the fact that there were 45 class meetings throughout the year, we could have scheduled them two ways, well, multiple ways. We could have gone, all the classes could have been once out of 4 days for all of them. Or we could have mixed it up with having the multiple days. One of the things we heard from the teachers is they valued having the students, like art was an example, they valued having the students consecutive days. So having them, as opposed to having the couple days gap between the students, where the students could work on a project and then continue that project the next day. I don't want to make it seem like it was overly scientific. It was really kind of a discussion and a consensus. Right. But we thought there was value to having them different, and so like it does mix it up a little bit for students and for teachers.
So for an art project, you know, if you're doing something with paint and you want to make sure that you're don't have too long a break between applications of whatever. Is that kind of the concept?
Yeah, and storage of materials, projects that are maybe continuation for it makes sense to do something right away.
Right. So if you're only storing for half the students, because you only have them for half.
Right. Right. So you have a smaller number of students in the semester courses. Your total number of students that you're teaching is smaller, which has some advantages to the teachers.
Hi, Dr. F. Sludge. Thanks for the presentation. The more times you talk, the more questions I seem to have. That's the other danger. I just actually have two. If you could go to slide 16 or 17. Yes, they're both the sort of ones, or six. Okay, this is the one where, why don't you go to 16? Okay. On the open period, where you could either, that's where you had the choice, if the challenge or ISL.
Correct.
But if you weren't in either a challenge or an ISL student, then your only choice was either PE or music?
Correct. At this point, it was the choices are additional phys ed or music. And so one question, I'll let you ask your question, but I'm
No, go ahead. I think you're going to answer my next question.
One question that has arisen, which is a good one, is why those two and not more?
Yes.
And so why aren't the other courses opportunities to have an additional option? And we're not against that. We wanted to introduce choice to the schedule. We also would like to explore introducing more choice down the road, but we're a little cautious about over-promising, being able to deliver that, and so we want to do it gradually. And also, to get back to similar to what Diane had said, if we're offering them differently, like one is offered once every 4 days, the other's 2 out of 4, then it would be hard to add the one of the other classes that wasn't offered in the same model. Does that make sense?
Right, but just so I understand, I'm not quite sure how it works then in terms of for just the student without the challenge or the ISL.
Okay.
And they have to fill this hole in the schedule with either what if they're not interested in music at all? So then the only thing they can do is the PE, right? And that would be a second PE?
It would be a second PE or a second music. Correct. So, I mean, does the possibility exist that a student would want neither of those two? It would. I think it's unlikely, but the possibility exists. We always work with families if there's a special scenario that they wouldn't want to have a second phys ed. The choice would be, they'd have to either do a second health, which might not be optimal for them, or either. But we would work with families.
Did you consider possibly like another learn period, or a?
That wouldn't be possibility just technically, just because the advantage of the middle school schedule is the entire grade is at specials at the same time. And so all the students in grade 7 are somewhere in a special area, which allows for the common planning time for teachers, and allows for parent meetings, allows for team meetings, team collaboration. So that would be challenging. An extra learn period would be challenging.
And my final question was simply how do the special programs, the artifacts and Waterbound, how are their schedules are they independent from these schedules, or?
Yeah, it's a great question. It was one of our non-negotiables, and I failed to mention that, whether or not the interdisciplinary programs at both schools would be able to maintain their current programming as is. And the answer is yes. There's some very minor adjustments to when courses would meet, but the essence of the program is going to remain the same for each. There's 6 different programs. They each have their 6 different nuances, but those will be able to be maintained.
Thank you.
Additional questions? Ms. Pollard?
Dr. Everslot, again, thank you for the presentation. When the student in 6th grade is assigned to a team, does that student keep the same team through 8th grade, or does it change?
Now, the teaming is done just on a year-by-year basis. So just 6th grade they're teamed. So one of the things that I actually am proud of that I think we do really well is the 6th grade teams are balanced by gender and by feeder school. So there's when three elementary schools. So on each team, there's a balance of students from each of the 3 elementary schools, and there's a male-female balance on the teams to the best that we can. We don't try to maintain those feeder pattern balances moving forward in 7th and 8th. And I think one of the great things is the kids will be on different teams throughout their experience in middle school.
Any additional questions? Okay, great. So what I'd like to do at this point is offer public comment, or have public comment around the agenda items, particularly the presentations that were made. Just if there's anyone who would like to speak, if you could come and sign in with Mr. Orlando. And there is a 3-minute time limit. If you could tell us your name and generally where you reside in the district.
Good evening, everybody. I have a couple of questions. The K through 2
I know we know you, Ms. Jenkins, but just if you
Ruth
could.
Jenkins,
Yeah,
Wynwood.
thank you.
K through 2 presentation. I was concerned about the extended kindergarten day and the evaluation of those students who are now identified as needing a full day of kindergarten. Is that kindergarten also going to be part of this creative program and not just more of the same? So if you put the kids, some of the feedback I've been getting from parents in the kindergarten program is that the kids are just doing another half day of kindergarten rather than a more enriched program and more personalized identifying of the issues to make them ready for 1st grade. The second question I had was about the first period homeroom. Does that make the first period longer than all the other periods, or does that stay the same and then you just have a shorter first period because you're taking homeroom attendance and getting the kids undressed? The other thing that I just wanted to mention was in the last few sessions that I've been here, there have been a lot of Penn-Win parents coming, and they wait a long time, sometimes till 10:30 before they have an opportunity to speak. And I think it would be more encouraging of participation and of hospitality, that when there is a big issue and a big crowd, that maybe forego some of the business aspects of the program and let these people speak earlier, and not just having to be an agenda item, rather than waiting for 10 or 10:30, and many of them left. I mean, as I sit here, a lot of them just couldn't stay. They have work to do. They have children at home. So that's my comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Jenkins, for your questions. A couple answers to your questions. First and foremost, the investigations is a resource that we're adopting. It's not a new curriculum. It's not a new program. It's just a resource that's more aligned with the current standards. So the resource goes from throughout all of elementary school. We currently, the recommendation to the board was to purchase the resources and the books and electronic resources for K2. So students that were in kindergarten or extended day kindergarten, that would be one additional resource to help them better access the curriculum. The extended day kindergarten is a smaller group setting, so it is not necessarily a duplicate of the morning. It's a small group setting for groups around 5 to 6 students in each school that would benefit from the additional reinforcement of those skills. And your question regarding the middle school schedule, yes, there are 5 minutes added on to first period schedule, so that class is actually 51 minutes as opposed to 46, and that allows for announcements and just some distribution of any materials like a homeroom would be.
Thank you.
And I'll respond to the question regarding some of our parents and community coming out to speak on particular topics. We have had special work sessions specifically dedicated to Penguin and other topics, particularly around enrollment growth. And in those meetings, we do have a robust discussion and dialogue, much like we do in our morning or evening committee meetings. Unfortunately, with the business meeting, our task as Board of School Directors is to cover the business of the board and then to open it up for questions, but we try to be as flexible as we can. Mr. Copeland?
Yeah, so I just want to thank the board and public's indulgence as we've gone through this. I think this has been a really good exercise in looking at the schedule. You know, the schedule of a school is meant to provide some consistency and some clarity in the implementation of program. One of the things that we've been working with in the strategic plan is saying, okay, but when it becomes a constraint, so that there are things that you can't do, we have to try and balance that. And so we don't break it, but we try and bend it a little bit. And I think that the group that worked on this for the last year and a half really made a great effort at saying, first, what's good for young people at this age, and how can we deal with some existing parameters that we know are going to exist, but at the same time not be ruled by them. And I think this is a good first step. I appreciate it.
So just again to reiterate our appreciation to the administration for the work around the middle school schedule. I looked at the number of meetings as presented by Dr. Everslock a moment ago. We had 5 public meetings around the schedule, 2 parent information sessions, and extreme due diligence in terms of the level of dialogue, and have taken the community comment and parent comment into consideration as we move forward with what is a schedule the board thinks, and we've heard them from the community as well, that nicely aligns with the strategic plan and provides some choice for students, not an overwhelming amount, but enough such that we prepare them well for their transition into our high schools. And so at this time, are there any other questions or comments around the schedule from the board before we provide the support necessary to move forward with implementing the newly proposed schedule for our middle schools? All right, seeing none, I'll turn things over to Mr. Copeland again.
Just a word about some of the things that we've been doing with our budget meetings. We've had a number of finance committee meetings that Ms. Bonaventura, Diane has chaired, and we've done operations and facilities, we've done curriculum. Still on the agenda are special services, and staffing along with technology. And we do the preliminary budget in January with an eye towards not being quite where we need to be as things gel. And I've mentioned this in a number of the meetings that we've had. Over the last 5 or 6 years that I've looked at the board's budgeting process, last year was my first in Lower Merion, for the most part, the board begins with one number and may end with another number in terms of the overall budget. And that's because we don't have all of the information that we need, and we still don't, as we're going forward. Last year, what really concerned us was, of course, the enrollment growth that had really jumped up, and we're still concerned. This year, we're running about 100 more students enrolling, mostly at the K-5 level, than we did this time last year. So we're not quite sure where that's going to roll out. However, having said that, and I mentioned this, I think at the Finance Committee meeting or some meeting, we're getting better information from our insurance brokers around some reduction in benefits that would cost that we may be able to apply. So when we have the board meeting on the 24th, I think we're going to be in a pretty good shape to see some changes. But again, let me say that that's not unusual from what the Lower Merion School District has done in the past. So I just wanted to remind folks, I had mentioned it at the last meeting, I thought I'd say it, but we'll have and even then, it'll be April. And we'll, to see what happens going forward.
Thank you, Mr. Copeland. I was remiss in not acknowledging our middle school administrators around the outreach to students. The students have been equally engaged around the changes, proposed changes in the middle school schedule, to the point where my own daughter and her friends have kind of accosted me and said, okay, what is this all about? So I appreciate the dialogue and appreciate us supporting our students in terms of what they think their needs are and how we can best engage them, particularly as we build through this strategic plan. So our next meeting is our board business meeting this coming Monday, April 24th, 8 p.m. in this room. And with that, we're adjourned. Thank you.